Connor.
I'm Cailynn.
I'm Anissa.
And this is our research project on the fundamentals of bunting a softball. When looking at bunting down the third base line or the first base line, you're looking at the Magnus effect. Now, the Magnus effect is something you kind of see with pitching, with the rotation of the ball, but you can also see that in bunting because when you're looking at a bunt going down the third base line, coming off the bat, it's going to have a spin towards the left, and obviously when you go down the first base line, it's going to have a spin to the right. The Magnus effect is dependent on the speed of rotation. The Magnus effect is the force exerted on a rapidly spinning cylinder or sphere moving through air or another fluid in a direction at an angle to the axis of spin. When you're talking about how that spin is created, you're looking at the angle of the bat. So obviously when you bunt it down the third base line, you're going to have the bat pointed towards each line. So when it goes to third base line, it's going to be pointed to the third base line. First base is going to be pointed towards the first base line. And how that spin is created is with that angle after it hits the bat, it's going to the first base line with the bat being a little open. When it hits the bat, it's going to cause a spin to the right, causing it to go down the first base line. Then obviously when you go down the third base line with the bat closed, it's going to create a left spin, causing the ball to move down the third base line. So when looking at the stance in a bunting form, you're looking at the base of support. This is the region of ground surface which the body contacts with. With bunting, this would be the playing surface the player is playing on, which you can look at a dirt field, a turf field, and then even if you're just not playing, if you're just out having fun, you can do it in the video shown. We're on grass, so in our case, the base of support would be the grass that we're standing on. When looking at the stance as well, you see that there's a center of gravity, and this is the point at which the center of mass comes down perpendicular to the base of support. In bunting, our center of gravity would be the legs. Like in the earlier video, we talked about base of support, which is the grass in the video. So our center of gravity would be the legs, because when you're looking at perpendicular, you can look at it in a backward T. So the bottom part of the T would be our base of support, and the stem of the T will be our legs because it is in a vertical motion. So Newton's first law also ties into bunting because it is changing the ball's direction, initially dictated by the throw from the picture. So when you're looking at the definition of Newton's first law, it is often stated as an object at rest stays at rest, and an object in motion stays in motion with the same speed and in the same direction unless acted upon by an unbalanced force. So in this case, the unbalanced force would be the bat, and then the object that is at the same speed and the same motion will be the ball. So how it changes direction is pretty simple. When the pitcher makes a pitch and the batter makes the bunt on the ball, the ball is going in a different direction, and that's how Newton's first law ties into bunting. So also you see Newton's second law of motion tying into bunting because the mass of the bat is not in motion. In a way of saying it in very simple terms, it is a force applied to an object at rest because it is to accelerate in the direction of the force. So when you're looking at the bunt, the bat is obviously not in motion, it is at rest, and the ball that is being pitched is the one that is in motion. So you see the mass acceleration is provided by the softball that is pitched. And the whole point of the bunt is to have the ball roll to a stop short of an infielder or a pitcher. So with the bunt, with the bat not having any motion to it, the bunt will have very little force generated by the softball since the bat is not in motion. Newton's third law of motion also ties into bunting because for every action there is an equal and opposite reaction. This is applied to bunting because if the bat is at an angle with the barrel pointed downwards, the ball will be popped up, compared to the bat with the barrel of the bat being pointed more towards the sky, will allow the ball to get on the ground quicker, which makes the bunt more effective. And you also see this with the equal and opposite reaction. So as the pitcher's throwing the ball, when the person makes the bunt, while the pitcher throws it one way, when the bunt, it's going to force it the other way. And you can use the same thing for bunting because as the force is coming towards the bat, when the bat hits the ball, it's going to go in an opposite direction. So that's a way of showing how Newton's third law of motion is tied into bunting.
Start with the normal batting stance. As you're going for the bunt, you turn and rotate your feet like you're squishing a bug. It is important to stay on the balls of your feet so you can maintain your balance. Your heels are pointed away from the midline of your body when squishing the bug technique. The back foot's ankle is going to be in plantar flexion in your bunting position.
Okay, so the first part of the body I'm going to discuss is the knees. The knees are very important in a bunting movement. The anterior and posterior cruciate ligaments of the knee will be used. It should also be noted that the bursa is a very important structure in the knee. It allows for the skin to glide smoothly over the kneecap. Since we are bunting a ball and the knees are bent and the hips are rotating on the transverse plane, it is vital that the skin is allowed to glide smoothly over the kneecap to allow for a full rotation. Keep in mind that the knee is a ginglymus joint, so it is only going to be able to bend one way. The bones that are used are the femur, the tibia, and the patella, and the muscles being used are the quadriceps and the hamstrings. To be more specific, the rectus femoris, the vastus intermedius, vastus lateralis, and vastus medialis are going to be engaged in this movement. The iliotibial band, or the IT band, and meniscus are located within the kneecap and allow for the knee to have strength. Now for the legs. I discussed a couple of leg muscles and bones that are involved in a bunt previously, but to be more specific about the movements of the legs are going to be shoulder width apart because of the stance of the feet. The quads and hamstrings themselves aren't going to be what is moving, but the ankles, knees, and hips are going to be the contributing factors to movement. The main parts of the hips consist of the pubis, ilium, and the ischium. The hips have ball and socket joints that connect the pelvis to the femur bone. This allows for the lower half of the body to rotate on the transverse plane. The hips are also going to end up facing the pitcher at the end of the bunting motion. The lower half of the spine should also be considered in bunting because if the body isn't balanced, the bunt isn't going to be placed where it needs to be. The sacrum is at the very bottom of the spine and sits right behind the pelvis. It doesn't have much to do with the bunt, but having a slight pelvic tilt in the bunting stance is going to be very important in laying down a bunt properly.
Now we're going to be discussing the major bones and muscles of the upper body during the bunt. The parts of the upper body that are used are the hands, elbows, shoulders, wrists, and fingers. The top hand is going to be in a supine position, and the bottom hand will be in a prone position. The top hand is going to be pinching the base of the bat and keeping the bat head up in about a 45-degree angle. The bottom hand is going to be a base for holding the bat. The bones in the hand that are involved are the carpals, metacarpals, and phalanges. The elbows are also going to be bent, and the bones involved in the arm are the humerus, radius, and ulna. The elbow and the ginglymus joint is also known as a hinge joint. This means the elbow can only bend one way. The scapula and clavicle are the bones involved in the upper part of the trunk. The shoulders aren't going to move much because the lower half of the body is going to bend up and down to get the bat to the correct position to bunt the ball. The wrists are going to be what pushes the bat towards the ball for a push bunt, and it is going to be what keeps the bat in a strong position to hit the bat so it doesn't recoil. There are a lot of bones in the wrist, including the trapezoid, trapezium, scaphoid, capitate, hamate, pisiform, triquetrum, and the lunate. The wrist shouldn't bend during a bunt, but by using the elbows and wrists at the same time, the bat can be pushed out to reach the ball.
So when it comes to bunting, you obviously have some pros and cons. One of the main pros of a bunt is you can move the runner up into scoring position. So say the runner is at first base and you want to get them into a more optimal scoring position, you move that sacrifice bunt will move the runner to second. With that, there is a con when moving the runner up. You're sacrificing an out and a bat and potentially a run because you're basically taking the bat out of the player's hands by making them lay a bunt down. While it could be good as you're moving the runner into scoring position, you're also losing an at-bat and also losing a run potentially, but you're mainly giving the other team an out. Another pro you see when bunting is it also keeps their defense on their toes. So changing up what you do on offense could lead to you getting more people on base. If you are having a good day at the plate and all of a sudden you lay a bunt down when they least expect it, the odds of you getting on base go up higher because they weren't expecting it. So a pro could be just keeping the other team on their toes on defense with laying a good, successful bunt down.
All right, so in softball, sometimes there's going to be situations in which you need to move a runner, and sometimes this can't be done with a base hit or relying on somebody to just hit the ball. So most coaches are going to have you do a sacrifice bunt. So you can do a sacrifice bunt with a runner at first, a runner at second, runner at third. You can have two runners on, like at first and second, or first and third, or even second and third. Sometimes even bases loaded, but that's not as common. So we're going to talk about a situation with a runner at first. This has an 87% success rate, and most of the time this is what runners are going to do, or what coaches are going to have their batters do, is have somebody sacrifice bunt with a runner at first to get them moved to second. Same thing with a runner at second. If we're wanting to get them in a scoring position at third, maybe the next batter is having a really good day and can get a base hit and knock that runner in, it's good to have a sacrifice bunt for a runner at second. That has an 88% success rate. A runner at third, this isn't as common, and it doesn't have as high of a success rate. It has a 72% success rate. When you have runners at first and second, this is a really good success rate because the defense is going to want to try to get that out at first. They're not going to be really worried about the out at third, and you can try to push bunt this towards first or even towards the pitcher to try to get everybody moved ahead one base. That has a 90% success rate again. When you have runners at first and third, this is an 89% success rate. Most of the time your defense is going to try to get the out at first again. In some situations they may try to look the runner back at third, but most of the time they're just going to go ahead and go to first. When you have runners at second and third, this is a 72% success rate. Most of the time, it's just going to be depending on where the bunt's laid at, on where they're going to get the out. Most of the time, again, it's going to be first. So that's going to be a sacrifice for that batter, obviously. And lastly, we have the bases loaded situation. This is going to be when you're in a tight pinch, not really worried about getting a hit, but you want to get a bunt. This is a 64% success rate again. And you're going to have to lay down a really good bunt to not get the runner out at home. You're going to want to push that up the third base or the first base line.
Okay, so in a sacrifice situation for a base hit, the batter hits the ball and makes it to a base, or double, or triple. A reach-on error is the defense fumbles the ball or overthrows the base. A ground out would be the batter grounds the ball to a defender and gets thrown out. A pop-up, the batter pops up the ball and gets out. The batter probably dropped their shoulder, which caused the pop-up. There can be infield pop-ups and outfield pop-ups. In a sacrifice situation, the batter is more than likely to get out. If the batter moves the runner or runners to the next base, they did their job successfully.
So as we can see, for sacrifice situations, the base hit is going to be at 19%. Reach on error for being the lowest percentage at 4%. Ground out at the highest percentage of 70%. And pop up for 8%. For non-sacrifice situations, we see base hit being the highest percentage at 52%. Reach on error for the lowest percentage for 3%. Ground out is 41%. And pop up is 5%.